My guest on today's podcast is the extremely talented and versatile Tosca Lee. She's written a handful of books and published everything traditionally up to this point. You're going to enjoy our exploration of self-publishing and what role it might serve in even a well-established traditionally published author's life, as well as all of the benefits of traditional publishing. I think this is a barn burner of a conversation, and so I'm not going to ramble on at all this morning. Let's get right into it. My guest again is Tosca Lee.
This is TRBM Ammo Edition. If you're a published author and want to make a living writing books and selling them to avid readers, you've come to the right place. There's simply no program that's more successful at driving readers towards the books you've written. So the only thing you have to worry about is writing a great book. And the system within Ammo takes care of the rest. Thanks for listening to this conversation.
It took me 6 years to get my first book published. So between the years of 2000 and 2006, a lot was changing already.
Yes.
By the time my first book got purchased. So, self-publishing was really different at that time. And I'm getting ready to put 2 of my books back out myself. So it'll be my first time doing that. It'll be their 5th editions. So they've been traditionally published by 3 different publishers previously.
Wow. Okay.
So it's definitely changed. And I always tell other authors that even if you're traditionally published, you still have to hustle like you're self-published.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. That's probably the highlight of the episode already. We can just wrap and call it quits. No, but it's true that's the theme of this conversation is no matter how you publish right now, unless your name is Stephen King or Robert Galbraith / J.K. Rowling, you're going to have to market yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that. By the way, before we do, though, let's talk about that first novel in 2000. What did it feel like to get a novel purchased? Did you have a sense like, this is it? I've arrived and I'm done. What was the emotion that you had at that moment?
Well, I'd been trying to get a novel published since I wrote my first one in 1989. I tried to get an agent in 1990. That book was not publishable. It was not worthy to be published. So I'd been trying to do this for a long time. So when I wrote the book that eventually got purchased in 2006 and then came out in 2007, it was kind of like, okay, yeah, this is finally happening. It was the thing I had envisioned and wanted to happen for so long. So in a way, yeah, you're really excited, but it's also kind of like, okay, finally, because, at that point it's been,
of course,
16, 17. I mean, it's been a long time, right? So
since you wrote metaphorically the end. I don't think any novelists actually write the end when they finish a novel. That's just kind of a thing that we say.
Well, some might, but
yes, that's true. None that I know so far, but I'm sure someone does. Point being, though, is like, from that moment, you thought, okay, finished product. And now there's a finite amount of time before I get a literary agent. There's a finite amount of time before I get a publishing deal. There's a finite amount of time before I'm on a book tour. There's a finite amount of time before I'm talking to Larry King. Everything feels like it's just about to happen. And so I guess I wonder, I keep going off on little tangents, but I'm fascinated by this idea of like, did you feel disappointed when it didn't go exactly as promised? And did you have to change the way that you thought of things along the way? So like from 1989 to 2000, what kind of mental calisthenics did you go through to get to that point?
I just wanted to have a book that was good enough to get an agent and get published. I wanted to be able to chase down an agent and sign a contract with them. I had visions of sitting in my office and, printing off my finished novel and having conversations with my agent and having conversations with my publisher. And I didn't know exactly what that looked like or what it would sound like, but and all those things have come to pass. Every now and then when I think to myself, gosh, publishing's hard now, or, you have to do so much work or whatever. These are all first world problems when it comes to publishing, because, I can complain about something to my agent, or I can talk to my
Yes.
husband and say, gosh, we need a bigger marketing budget or whatever. But,
Mm.
the fact is, here we are, and I've got 12 books out now. And
Yeah.
so there never was big disappointment for me, especially with my
Mm.
first book, because there was
Nice.
no roadmap. There was nothing I was really trying to, tick off the boxes for.
Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
was just kind of on the journey. And so when the sales team was like, hey, look, we're going to go meet with Walmart, or we're going to go meet with so and such, we'd really love to have you come join us in that meeting. I was like, okay, and I'd go along. Or we'd love to send you to this trade show and have you come
Mm.
sign here or there, or send you to, on this tour here. I was along for the ride.
What is author marketing mastery through optimization, you ask? I'm going to tell you. It's the best way for us authors to make a living selling our books. Are you tired of hearing gurus tell you your book is only good enough to be a lead magnet for services? Are you tired of feeling like you have to be a slave to social media and then frustrated when the time you spend doesn't actually help you sell books? I was too, until I found Ammo. Ammo is the only program that reliably produces results, and it works for anyone. Is it hard work? You bet. Do you have to overcome some of your own prejudices to make Ammo work for you? Absolutely. But rather than being another program that rah-rah shish-goom-bahs tries to get you emotionally excited only to offer unclear methods, Ammo shows you how to design profitable ads step by step through a unique, highly tested and targeted formula. The founder, Steve Piper, is a data-loving, formula-driven author who escaped the kingdom of Amazon to build a platform for himself, where he sold directly to his readers and built a loyal following and millions of copies sold. With Ammo, you know who's reading your books, how to contact them, and what they want to read next. If you've always been frustrated with Amazon's wall of mystery of not knowing who's reading your books and losing 50 to 70% of your hard-earned money that you're making through sales, Ammo solves all of those problems by putting you in the driver's seat and showing you how to fulfill your books directly to your readership. Click the link in the show notes to learn more.
Yeah. Some of those rides were more extensive than others, and the age of book tours it's very different now, especially post-pandemic, than it was even 10 years ago. I mean, 10 years ago, you'd be gone for a week or two or more. Mm-hmm. And, my publisher would send a town car to pick me up from my house and drive me to the airport. And then, a publicist would go with you on tour, and, it's different now. It's budgets are tighter. So much is virtual. Mm-hmm. But, maybe that's been kind of a saving grace for me, that I've kind of always been along for the ride, but I'm also really willing and really, really enjoy the work of getting out and talking to people and doing that stuff.
Yeah.
So
one of the things that I have started to do more extensively, and there's a lot of joy to it. In fact, you're local to the Omaha area, or were.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, you are still. So I was just at the St. Thomas More Peddlers Market this past week, and just had a booth set up, and sold like 50 books, and that felt really nice. It felt really good to be out and talk.
That's a good number of books to sell.
Not so bad. Yeah. It felt really nice to be out there and talk to readers and remind myself, in a sense, why I do this, because I think in this current environment, a lot of what we do is that online selling. And so it's cool to hear the Spotify app, like cha-ching, or not Spotify, excuse me, Shopify, say cha-ching, you got your sale, or whatever it might be.
Right.
Or get your Amazon KDP monthly report and see those numbers and feel good about that and say, yes, I am selling, and yes, there's a reason why I'm doing this. But I would venture to say, and I'd love to hear your thought about this too, it feels better to me to talk with a reader who's like, yes, I would love to read your book, and then sell them that book and sign it and hand it over. One reader have that interaction than it does to see the KDP report that says, all right, you made $1,000 this month. I don't know why, because obviously I'd rather make $1,000 than sell one book, but there's something really gratifying about that single interaction. What are your feelings about that?
Well, numbers are just that. They're just numbers. There's
Yeah.
no humanity to them. So I love interacting with readers. So in the Omaha area, I was just most recently at the new downtown branch, Omaha Library, gave a talk there.
Oh
And
yeah.
so got
Beautiful
to
building.
interact with a group of readers all at once. The Bookworm, which is our local bookstore, came down
Mhm.
and sold books there. And it's always wonderful. A, because I've got a great relationship with the bookstore. But B, because,
Yeah.
readers are people. There was a gal I danced with decades ago, literally decades ago, who was there, and I got to reconnect with her. New readers, I got to connect with them.
Mhm.
And my most recent book is a World War II novel. And so
Yeah.
it's really gratifying when people show up and they say, I'm reading this book because my father was in the Philippines. That's where my book is
Mm.
set during
Mhm.
World War II and never spoke about his experience. And so I'm reading this to learn more about what his experience could have been like. And so you've really been invited into the personal lives of your readers.
Yeah.
And that's an honor and a privilege. And so I think that's why it's so much more fun to be able to interact with readers in person, and have those,
Yes.
because the humanity is there.
Yeah. Beth Black at the Bookworm is one of the coolest people. I love to shout her out anytime I can because I just really enjoy her a lot.
Yes.
She's
Yeah.
been a great partner for local authors, you and me and several others, but also I think authors from smaller publishers. And I think that's a really cool thing that she's spearheaded. So I love the Bookworm. I love what she's doing. Uh, when you wrote a World War II novel, this has nothing to do with marketing, but it's really just something I think about a lot of times. Was there a place in your mind where you thought like there's a lot of World War II literature? And did anyone caution you against it? Where did it come from? Tell the story behind it, obviously, because you can sell more books just by talking about it. But also, World War II is a very saturated market. So it
It
was,
absolutely is.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let me just tell you a little bit about the book itself, because that'll help explain my response to those questions. And the book is called The Long March Home. It's about three best friends who are serving in the Philippines. They're stationed there before Pearl Harbor happens. And then
Mm,
when Pearl Harbor is bombed, the Philippines is plunged into war. That's something I didn't know when I
mm,
agreed to work on this book. I didn't know that within 10 hours of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Philippines was also bombed and war started there. And so for these three best friends, it's the beginning of their fight for survival. And so they are fighting in this war until the Allied surrender of April 1942. And when that surrender happens, it begins this chapter of World War II history that a lot of people haven't heard of, called the Bataan Death March.
yeah.
And it's where the POWs were marched 60 miles over 6 days. Those who stopped to rest or to help somebody or for any reason were shot or bayoneted or beheaded. And those who survived, it was the beginning of almost 4 years of POW life for them.
Yeah.
So the way that I came into the story is one of my writing friends, Marcus Brotherton, called me up and said, "Hey, listen, I want to write this book. I've been working on it on the back burner in between projects." Marcus is very prolific. He's very well known for his World War II nonfiction, especially. And he said, I feel like I need a partner in this. Would you like to join me? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And part of the beauty of working on this project is, as you said, the market is very saturated. World War II fiction is very popular,
Yeah.
but you don't see a lot of the Pacific theater in that genre. And you don't see a lot of what happened in the Philippines in
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
so for us, it was a chance to shine a light on those heroes that served in the Philippines and to share that part of history with others who like me may not have been familiar with what went on there.
Yeah. Was there more to your choice to write that novel? What was the personal connection to it for you? Because I know that even though I write largely speculative fiction, in genre,
Mm-hmm.
um, I always have a personal connection to everything I write. There's always some kernel of me that goes into the book that helps it to bloom and become what it is. Otherwise, I just don't have enough energy to get the project finished. And that's not to assume that you have a relative or a friend that was in the war or anything. It's just some sense of like, oh, this is the piece of me that it took to grow this book.
Yeah, I don't have, to my knowledge, a relative that served in the Philippines or even in the Pacific. But I am half Asian. And so this is, an area of the world that I've visited frequently. I haven't been to the Philippines, but I've been all over Asia. And I'm always interested in knowing more about different aspects of history. And I write historical fiction, but in my past, my historical fiction to date has been 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. So I write very ancient historical fiction. So this is really new stuff. And I'm always up to try something new.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I'm curious because it's such a foreign thing to me. So the mode that I prefer to write fiction in is the least amount of research that I have to do, the better I'm going to be. Now, if you were to ask my wife, for example, she would say that I'm annoyingly research heavy. So just my life is lived where I'm always spending a lot of time in nonfiction, learning about the world, about wars, about different countries. And like it just is endless for me. And I get like off on these just absurd obsessions about different topics. But when it comes to writing, I absolutely want to be free of the research. So it's kind of like I load it in, and then when it's time to write, I don't want to put it on my table because it changes my brain out of create mode into dive and dig mode. There are writers like yourself. A writer that I spent a good amount of time with in college was Marilyn Robinson. She's similar, just a ton of research into her novels. I could not function that way. Talk to me a little bit about that process for you and how that helps you in the creative space.
I do the research before I start outlining because the research may inform my outline. There might be something interesting that happened that might turn out to be a pivotal moment in my outline. So I do all that first. When I sit down to write, though, it's just like what you said. I need to kind of clear all that out of my head. So, there might be a lot of stuff that I researched that never even goes into the book, but I needed to know it because it put me in the right space. When I'm actually doing the writing, if there's something I need very specifically, I try to just leave a space there and come back and research and fill it in later, because it interrupts the flow of the actual writing. If I have to stop and I've done this before. I mean, I've fallen into that trap before where I spent a whole day once researching first century ancient Israel public latrines. And it ended up like making an appearance in half a sentence, but I spent that whole day off on this weird rabbit trail trying to figure out how does this work? What did they use for toilet paper? It was like, I needed to know, but so I try to avoid falling into that now if I can help it. But I will spend up to 18 months or more depending on what it is. Like for that book, Iscariot, which was set in first century ancient Israel, I needed those 18 months full-time researching.
Yeah. I want to touch later on the faith aspect because I know that that's there for you. And it's anybody who listens to the podcast knows that it's there for me, though more historically than current. I am curious, though, because we touched on this, and I think that there's a really good pinch point for anybody who listens to the show, which most everybody does, for the marketing aspect of what my guests can bring to the table. There is a tendency in me, and I assume in many people, to want to tirelessly research the way in which they promote their books, research their marketing aspects to the world. And what you just said to me makes so much sense in terms of marketing too, which is just get out there and do it. Like you've spent all the time you need to know to love your book, and now you just have to go out into the world and love your book on other people. How does that inform the way that you market? Because I know that you're marketing your book at this point, even though you're traditionally published, you still have a responsibility to tell people about it. Does my question make sense? I know it was not like the most clear. Okay, perfect.
It makes sense. I try not to worry too much about researching the best way to market for a few reasons.
Mhm.
A, I'll drive myself crazy. That's the
Yeah.
biggest reason. But, B, there are certain things that just seem more natural for me, and that's where I try to go. So I try
Okay.
to interact with people on social media. That's very natural for me. Anytime I can get out to a library, I've been really focusing on libraries a lot lately. Anytime
Yeah.
I can get out to a library, because they need programming,
Yes.
and they have patrons that are loyal to their
Mhm.
library and their library's programming. So anytime I can get to a library, anytime I'm invited to join a podcast or something like that, I try to say yes to as much stuff as I can.
Yeah.
I try to always have fun, and I'm fortunate enough to have a publicist that has been with me now for several years who also kind of forges that way for me. So that helps a lot as well. But I mean, all this marketing stuff, it's always changing. It's changing
It
with
is.
the technology. And I just don't have I'm 54 now. I don't have the energy.
I was going to guess you were 35, but
Yeah, well,
anyways.
that's very kind of you, but no. And so by the time I learn and study up on all this stuff, it's going to be different. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm tired.
Absolutely. Yeah, I hear you. So talk to me a little bit about libraries, since that sounds like it's something you do. I ran a whole series a little while ago. The only reason I moved off of libraries is I felt like I was lacking in guests who could kind of dive deeper with me for a bit. Um, but I had some amazing guests talk about their strategies for getting into libraries and using libraries as a hub for reaching more readers. You talked about going to the new downtown library. I will say, as just a quick note, that the original downtown library, I miss it. It was
Oh,
beautiful. Yeah, it was
oh.
great. It was a great place. But the new library is beautiful, and I won't get political with my thoughts there. But it's great that we have that new library. How have you used libraries to reach more readers? Is it you creating events or just you being available for events?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both.
Yeah.
So I've consciously been reaching out to libraries, particularly here in Nebraska,
Hmm.
that I can get to reasonably easily.
Yeah.
But also, across the river in Iowa or South Dakota, just
Hmm.
in the area. So
Sure.
I've been consciously reaching out, with my new book or my latest book or whatever, just to say, hey, look, I'm local,
Yeah.
and I'd love to come talk to your patrons. Love to talk about my most recent books. The
Mm,
reason I love doing it is there's so many reasons, but like I said, they need programming. They're
they
always
do.
looking for unique programming. And a big part of that, of course, is authors, but the patrons are there.
Mhm.
And I love going to small town libraries because
Mm,
there's readers and wonderful patrons and loyal readers in small town. It doesn't have to be the
yes,
biggest city you can get to.
that's right.
And I really love seeing the diversity in our libraries. There's so much stuff going on, and so many programs and so many resources. I've seen
Yes.
libraries of things where you can go like get a crock pot, or what you can go
Yeah.
get seasonal like baking pans. They've got maker centers.
Yep.
One of our local libraries, I believe it's Valley, Nebraska, the Nebraska room. It used to be a bank, and so the
Mhm.
Nebraska room is in the old vault
Oh,
of
that's amazing.
the bank in there in
That's
the
cool.
library. So it's just cool to get out. And sometimes you
Mhm.
have 10 people and sometimes you have 50. And,
Mhm.
and if you can bring in a local indie bookstore to come sell books at your event, that's wonderful. And it supports the local
I love
bookstore.
it.
If they don't, and unfortunately, there just aren't a lot of local
Mhm.
bookstores in some of our even larger towns.
Yes,
Then I'll schlep my books in and I'll have them available for anybody who wants to have them, and I'll sell books there too. So
I
it's
love it.
wonderful across the board for all of those reasons.
That's fantastic. A couple of details I want to touch on for people.
Yeah.
People, so a lot of authors are listening to this show, and one of the things that they're interested in is for a traditionally published author who is in your situation, how many books do you keep on hand so that you've bought author copies that you, like you said, can schlep to an event? How many of each title? Like, you don't have to be precise here, but generally speaking, how many do you try to keep on hand?
I try to keep at least a couple boxes of my most recent titles. So that could be anywhere from 20 to 40 or 50.
Calling all self-published authors. If you live in the United States and you've always wanted to see your books in bookstores, this may be the most important ad you'll hear in 2023. Listen carefully. No matter where you are in your publishing journey, it's not too early to position yourself to pursue brick and mortar bookstore distribution. But if you're a self-published author, you've probably heard getting your books in stores is next to impossible. That's no longer the case. For just $5, you'll receive a lifetime membership to the Self-Published Author Co-op. When you join, you'll have access to a members-only community with a detailed roadmap on how to get your books ready for bookstore distribution. Joining our community does not guarantee bookstore distribution, as there's a limited availability each month to be a featured author. And that's why the cost of a lifetime membership is less than a cup of coffee. Whether you're just about to publish your first book or you're selling thousands of copies a month, if you don't have your books in bookstores, the Self-Published Author Co-op is the easiest, most efficient way to get national distribution of your books. Click the link in the show notes to join now.
Kind of in a lull right now. So it doesn't do me any good to have a ton of inventory sitting around.
Yeah.
But also I have 12 novels. So I don't want to have like 40 copies of every single one of my novels because I'd be schlepping, for a week just to get the stuff into the venue. So, I may have some odds and ends as far as my backlist. But if I can have, 20 to 40 for an event just available, because not everybody's going to buy a copy, right?
No, yeah, absolutely.
One of the most important things I will say too is I really try to encourage people who come to my library events to sign up for my newsletter list. And I do that by having a sign up sheet. I do that also by doing a giveaway while I'm there for people who choose to sign up. I'll take a tote bag or something with a quote from one of my books. Tote bags are not expensive, but readers love them. So, it's a chance for me to grow my list as well.
Absolutely. That's great. Yeah, it's challenging to get people on lists. If I ever am in a mood where I most want to get new readers, it always comes in my email list. I'm always like, I wonder if there's a way I could just buy a list of people to email, because I mean,
I've
the
tried
email list is
different
powerful.
things like, you can do like book sweeps and things like that, but you really want the best people to have on your list are the ones who are engaged because they've already bought. Like they've already
attended an event.
They met you. They shook your hand and they heard you tell your story. Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. So those are the moments where you just have to be patient and kind of let the system work for you. I am signed up for 20 events in 2024. I aim to triple that at least. And then I really want to take those events and also build events around them. So like you said, I want to go to the Comic Expo in Sioux Falls and then turn that into a library event the night before maybe, and have other things around that so that you're really just building in everything you can to get as many readers and really like dig into the community. It's tiring. I'm curious after, and you've been doing this longer than I have by a couple of years. So I'm curious in terms of like energy, do you ever feel like all of the promoting of your work is tiring and you wish you could just write and someone else would take care of all of it for you?
I love doing events. I am an introvert, but I love doing events. I will say though that at some point this year was really heavy for me event wise, because in addition to doing promotional events and book talks, I also teach. So I teach writing and I also keynote. And so I'm either teaching writing or I'm keynoting or I'm at a library or I'm promoting my own books. And this year was really, really heavy, especially with my first new release in 4 years. Yeah. And so it was insane. And I realized at one point that I was kind of using these events to procrastinate writing my next book.
No kidding.
Okay. Yeah. Because in a way, it's easier to get out and talk about stuff you've already done than it is to write a new one, right? So there was that. But also there were so many events and I was on the road so much. I just finished my last thing a couple weeks ago I'm home now for about 2 months. And I am weary. I am really weary. And so weary, I'm ready to write now. I'm like ready to dig in and do some work.
Yes.
So
it's interesting you say that. So one thing is, I will admit, I try to do good research on all of my guests and be ready in the general, but I didn't realize you teach. I don't know about the teaching side of your world. I'm having dinner with Matt Mason tomorrow night. He's been on and off at UNO teaching poetry for a while, and was the poet laureate here in the state. He is still for a little while. I had the opportunity. He posted something on Facebook, and I jokingly said, "I'll be your date," to go to this insurance event. I don't know. So what is that connection? This is really, if there's nothing to talk about here, I'll just completely edit it out of the show.
Okay.
But what is your connection with other teachers and how they help you get out into the community? Because I think sometimes our peers in this work really help us.
Absolutely. I teach at the events that I used to go to. So
awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So, I used to attend Thriller Fest in New York City, and now
cool.
I'm on the board. And so I'm on the board and I run the awards for Thriller Fest. And because of that, I also, well, you can panel just by attending, but I also teach at Craft Fest ahead of time. And occasionally some years like this year, in 2024, I'll be teaching a master class ahead of time. That's an all-day master class. And I'm teaching alongside people like friends of mine, like Stephen James or J.D. Barker, or my agent, Donald Moss, is also teaching a master class, I believe, this year. And so, I'm teaching at conferences and things like that. I did teach recently at Metro Community College, just a, kind of a one-off thing last month.
Ooh,
but
okay.
So I will teach it at universities or colleges. But, I'm at WriterCon in Oklahoma City, or I'm at American Fiction Writers, or, online for, one event or another. So
sure.
Yeah.
No,
right.
That's brilliant. I love that. Okay. Yeah. You mentioned Stephen James. He was a guest on this podcast about a year ago. I met him through my friend Becky Robinson, who is absolutely amazing. She's one of the most just kick butt marketing teachers out there. She's great. She's so giving, and she has a beautiful business. So that's great. I love that. And I love the way that we make connections and the ways that you're teaching. You mentioned being at ThrillerCon, you said, in New York.
Thriller Fest. Yeah,
Thriller Fest. Thank you. Thriller Fest. What a great opportunity. Fests, cons, craft fairs, all of that kind of stuff. They're, I think, underused by other writers. Is that something where you have a budget every year to go to different things, or are you, as your publisher lets you know they're available? What's your process there for deciding where am I going to go?
Well, I used to go to the ones where I felt I would make the most advantageous connections. These days, because you can only do so much in a year, I'm generally going to events, like, in addition to Thriller Fest, I teach a keynote at Realm Makers or different things. That's speculative writers of faith. I'm generally going places where I've been asked to contribute. So
yeah,
I'm usually getting paid to go. So,
of course, that's great. That's perfect.
Thriller Fest is different because those who attend and those who teach there are all doing it on a volunteer basis. And so all the board, everybody's serving on a volunteer basis. But most of the conferences I'm going to these days are the ones that I'm going as faculty. And then I just try to take advantage and sit in on, great talks. I was at WriterCon with Lisa Gardner, so I got to hear her teach.
Very cool.
And that's how but that's where you forge those friendships. I mean, some of my best friendships, some of my best contacts have all come out of writing conferences, cons, fests, everything.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I said, there's just so many writers who don't even realize it's an opportunity. And I think that because of the age that we're in, many authors, even traditionally published, which I keep going back to that because many of the listeners here are self-published. They're working their way to either just always being self-published and having a large audience that way, or using self-publishing as a springboard to traditionally publishing. But yeah, I mean, I think it's so easy to underestimate the power of in person, to assume that Amazon will do everything for you. You know, if I
Well,
just
I
paid
think in
$10 to
person
Amazon,
is, it's
right?
invaluable
Yeah.
just to make those connections. And if you do go to, let's say, a convention or a conference, network as much as you possibly can, make friends with the people who run it. Make sure that people know what you have, not just to take from the conference, but what you can
Yes.
offer as
Yes.
well, because
Yes.
that's how you become involved. And you know, something else I will say, and this doesn't fall in the category of libraries or cons or conferences, but one thing I did this last year, which was so fun, is I joined my friend Brenda Novak on her book tour as a conversation partner. And so as she's
Oh,
on her
great.
tour, she's inviting friends to
Hmm.
join her at different stops around the country, to have conversations and to also highlight their books as well. And
Mm,
I love this, and I love doing this more and more. In fact, we were at meaning Lydia Kang and Sean Doolittle and another friend, Ann
I love
Kim, and I
Lydia.
were at the Bookworm. And I just think it's more fun sometimes if you can do events with other people. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, you're sharing the spotlight, but you're pulling in readers and combining audiences with
Yeah.
other writers as well.
That is such a good point. I'm glad that you pulled that gem out, because
Mm-hmm.
uh, collaborating with other writers will create some
Yes.
amazing things
And
for
better
all of
marketing
us.
for the event as well, because you've got that many more
Absolutely.
people sharing it.
Yeah, I've been thinking so much, and this is really for me. This is in the kind of like embryonic stages, but I've been thinking a lot about how to emulate the way that music is done. When musicians are coming up, there'll be an opener for a bigger band, and if you can be an opener for Aerosmith, I mean,
Right.
essentially, you've arrived at that point,
Right.
even though you're not the main band. Like that's 60,000 fans who are going to hear your music that night. And I think that a lot of authors need to start to figure out, how can I be an opener for someone like you? Because
That's a
you
great
bring an audience.
idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that because, you know, I love it too because the way the writing world has gone has always kind of followed the music world. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
music started to go, you know, digital and subscriptions and, you know, and
Exactly.
the
You're
writing
exactly right.
world has gone that way too.
It
So,
has.
but it's just more fun when you do
Yeah,
things with other people.
it is.
And
I
you
love
know,
that you say that. Oh, go ahead.
there's less of a chance that you're going to have one of those horrible, dreaded experiences that we've all had where you have an event and nobody shows up,
Uh-huh.
right?
Absolutely.
So we've all been
There are a
there.
few things that yeah, there are a few things that feel worse than five people showing up. I recently went to a book fair that I thought was going to be a big success, and it was in Des Moines. And there were probably 50 authors there, and I think 20 individual readers showed up to the
Wow.
whole day event. It was really frustrating. It was
Oh,
difficult. It
wow.
was challenging. For me, I left victoriously because I schlepped my books to the vendors, and so other vendors bought my books. But it was one of those moments where you're like, yeah, it highlights the importance of having heavyweights. I don't know any other way to say it. There's nothing wrong with using the already built marketing vessel of a great author and just being there and supporting them. Now, I will say, and you already said it, but I'll highlight it, there's a difference between tying your marketing tail to a famous author and using somebody. And I want to
Right.
like just say, like, be there to help, be there to support, be there to make much of other people. As long as you always have that spirit of, I want to make sure that everybody knows how great you are, I think we all win.
I think that's a really important point. Writing and marketing and this whole publishing thing is not a zero-sum game. And
Yeah.
so whenever I'm in between, you know, I spent 4 years between my last book and my newest release that came out this year. And so for 4 years, I didn't have anything new, but I could still promote and highlight my, you know, the work of other people who are some of my friends and some people are new to me. But the more you can be helpful to other people, you know, I believe in good juju coming back to you too.
Yes, me
And,
too.
you know, Brenda Novak's audience is way bigger than my audience.
Mm.
But so yes, I was there to be in conversation with her, but also I'm also there to help promote her books as well. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So let's wrap up by talking a little bit about the faith element. You mentioned Stephen James a little earlier. I know that he feels really strongly that he cannot write and publish a book that doesn't have a faith message to it. And some of his books are darker, but generally speaking, he really has a strong feeling that that is his purpose in the world. I still hold to the faith. I haven't been to church in a very long time. I have no intention of going back. If you talk to me in private, I will tell you about my faith and why I believe in what I believe, or on a podcast, I guess. So that's a very public way of doing it. But generally speaking, I am not at the same level as Stephen. My novels get really dark, and some of them you would have to dig pretty deep to find the faith message. And I'm not really worried whether I intentionally do it or not. Where does that play a role in what you're writing? Do you feel like you have to include it? What level of consideration is it getting on the finished product?
That's a really interesting question. And to ask it right now is really interesting too, because, my first book was called Demon, a memoir, and it was considered a Christian novel, even though a lot of, people found it too scary to read or whatever. It's not a scary book. It's really not. I've been considered a faith writer, but here's the thing for me. I don't feel like I have to have an overt faith message. If you want a sermon, you should go to church for that. Not Don't come to me.
Sure.
But I do want to tell a story that is redemptive or has some inspirational quality to it or hope to it. That's always important to me. And the reason I say this is interesting is because the World War II book that came out this year, The Long March Home, my co-author, Marcus Brotherton, and I made the choice to go with a Christian publisher. And so it was published by a Christian publisher. And there are very strong redemptive arcs in this story. But there's no overt sermon because that's not our style. And some readers wanted that. And some readers didn't get that from us. But we're probably not the writers, and this may not be the story for them. But that said, it is there because it's part of what's important to us,
Yeah.
I have friends who are writers of faith who write horror. I have friends who are writers of faith who write Amish stuff. I mean, so it's like,
yes,
I think, it's really hard to pigeonhole people based on that.
Right.
Yeah.
So the novel that I got my literary agent with, and the one that we shopped for a long time, it's in 9 parts, called The 9 Lives of Marvin DeLong High. And so it has 9 parts in it. And the first part ends with the main character being abducted and raped and killed. And there are so many people who choose not to read past that point because it's really dark. And they don't get to the final redemptive moment where she lays down her life for her best friend, which to me is like the whole purpose of the Bible. It talks about like there's no greater love than to lay down your life for a friend. And so it's pretty deeply hidden in there. But if you want to read to the end, it's there. And that's why I wrote that book. And that was the theme that I was struggling with. I believe that it's there, but I couldn't say it better than you did. If you want a sermon, go to church. That is a really good way of putting how I feel about it. You might not always be able to find it there, but it is there. So
some churches don't always have sermons in them, but and some books do have very overt,
and they're great
faith messages, and they have a very specific audience who turn to those authors for that.
That's right.
But we can't be all, as authors, we can't be all things to all readers, and
What a fantastic conversation. You are a more enjoyable person than I even expected, and I expected this to be a fantastic conversation. So thank you so much for your time. Tell everybody who's listening how to find you and how to connect with you if they want to buy your books, but also just know where you're going to be and visit you when you have an event.
Yeah, so a great place to start is my website, which is toscalee.com. It's TOSCALEE.com. And there's buttons there you can use to find me on social media. And you can, I do all kinds of stuff on social media. Most importantly, my dog is on social media, and he's more popular than me. He's a giant German Shepherd and everybody loves him. My calendar is on my website, but I do try to, as each thing gets closer, I do try to post it so that it's there and immediate. And I would love to connect with you. And my books are everywhere that books are sold online. And you can also, of course, request them at your local indie bookstore and at your library.
Oh, that's perfect. I love it. Thank you so much for your time, Tosca.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jody.
Thank you for listening to TRBM. The theme music was provided by the ever-talented Christopher Talon. And hey, if you liked what you heard, share this show with other readers, because what's the point of telling stories if nobody's listening?